So Lance Medina, thank you very much for joining. Much appreciated. So we had some technical difficulties, and one of the really interesting pieces, this is a good segue to our conversation, is there's so much to say about problem solving.
Yeah, I mean, even if you do all of the right things, I was a communicator in the military, and I swear, anytime I would get everything set perfectly, Newton's law would just appear and, destroy everything.
I think it's, I think that's something they don't teach you at school enough. I think that everything is structured at school. You're being trained to follow certain steps and then expect a certain outcome. But yet in life, it's very different, so, but you have some really tremendous background. This is what I love doing, is because I get a chance to talk to some really cool people, and I would definitely include you in the category. So why don't we get started with that? Just walk me through, how did you get to where you are today in terms of your career path?
Yeah, it's interesting now because during all the different stages from college onward, et cetera, I feel like if I was to look at my life on like a map, it would look just like that river that's just, there's no direct path. It's just this absolute swoop and ebb and flow. But I was in college. I got my bachelor's in theology and English, of all things. It was something I was interested in. I remember my dad being like, what are you doing? Why don't you go be an electrician or something like that? And just wasn't that good with my hands. I mean, you can ask my wife about any projects around the house, but I then went to grad school for my MBA and worked at a car dealership. So I was selling Infiniti, Range Rover, and Jag. And to any of the folks that I sold a car to that was Range Rover and Jag, I'm sorry if the warranty failed you or something like that. But I knew I wanted to serve in the military. And I kept coming in contact with folks that were some really amazing mentors along the pathway. But I enlisted into the Army. I knew I wanted to become a Green Beret, so Army Special Forces. And that was nerve-wracking because I was doing well at the car dealership, and my wife looked at what the...
And how old were you when you... How old? No, I just have to double-click on some of these things, and you don't mind me interrupting.
No, go ahead.
How old were you?
So I was 26 when I enlisted. So I was with a bunch of 18, 19-year-olds, and I was the old guy, the guy that had a house and a car. So I was 26 when I enlisted in the military after graduate school.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's why I had to double click on it because it's not typical. Yeah, as you mentioned, there's a lot of and I enlisted as well when I was 18, and I remember doing all that, school after the fact. So by the time I was, I finished my school when I was like almost 30. Mm-hmm. And I suspect you kind of did that in reverse. So first of all, why did you decide to enlist? And then, people enlist and they want to maybe join and become like an airplane mechanic, or something like more mundane. But you decided to, I want to be this, like all the way up here. So walk me through that kind of the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that I've been asked. So it's because it doesn't really on paper make a ton of sense, right? Normally folks either do the mechanic route, like he said, to get their GI Bill or whatever, but it's actually not that uncommon. The average age for it's called the 18 X-ray program in the Army. That's like on paper the contract that you sign. And the vast majority of people that I was around were in their late 30s, early 30s. One of my best friends was like a mastermind at Capital One, just a savant at banking, and gave that up to do this, or Microsoft, whatever. So I knew the mission set of Special Forces and the overall motto was De Oppressio Liber, and that was something that I resonated with. It's Latin for to free the oppressed, and I've read books and volumes of materials on what they did during Vietnam and the earlier days of Afghanistan, and we could talk about what that resulted in later if you like. But the main reason that I wanted to do it is, first off, just to see if I had it in me to achieve that. I knew the physical standards were difficult, but specifically out of all of special operations, you have SEALs, pararescuemen in the Air Force, and then different variants, Army Rangers. The the really difficult part, because anybody can run, anybody can carry a heavy, well, I say anybody can run. Most people can run that join the Army. And the difference here is there's a lot of psychological testing and a lot of problem solving. Like you mentioned earlier with technology, they'll give you a map and a compass, and selections particular at Fort Bragg, and they'll say, okay, this is your grid coordinate. This is where you need to be in 5 hours. You have your backpacks, your rucksacks, this amount of rope, these poles, these sandbags. Figure it out. Get there in 5 hours. And whether you're an officer or enlisted, you're all treated the same in selection. So I might get a little mission set like that, and I have to, on the spot, assign people to different tasks, put together a mission plan, and get it done. So there's all this kind of challenging, and there's always a cadre or an assessment person taking notes and watching. How does this guy handle stress with no sleep? How do they handle no food? Land navigation, figuring out where you are, and being able to make those decisions on the fly. I chose the enlisted route mainly because I knew as long as I could meet the basic physical requirements or exceed them, I would at least get a chance to attend Special Forces assessment and selection. Versus officers, it's a lot more of a political gamble. You have to be the rank of captain in the Army to try for it. And then if you're not, if your commander doesn't really want you to leave, or if you're really good at your job and they want you to stay there, they might not approve your paperwork in time or something like that. So there's a lot more of a chance. And I just didn't want to allow any external factors to stop me from getting to try. If I was going to fail, it was going to be on me.
And for the people that are not aware, you talk about the selection process in particular. We're talking about, the odds are very much against you. Like, how many people actually joined or at least start the selection process, and how many people actually completed?
Sure. Rough numbers, I want to say we had 430 attendees at our selection, and it was in January, specifically at Camp McCall, which is just north of Fort Bragg in North Carolina. And even though it's North Carolina, it was cold. So we had a lot of guys showing up from Hawaii, At the end of the 21 days, I want to say we had around 40 to 45 people that actually got selected. It ebbs and flows.
And then beyond that, so beyond that, so looking at less than 10% be rough numbers. And then out of that, I'm assuming not everybody completed the whole process, right?
That's correct. The start of we'll call it the Q course or the qualification course. That's roughly another year and a half for most occupations, aside from the medics, which they extend for roughly a year due to their medical training and the different clinical trials that they have to go through, et cetera. But we probably would lose another 5 or 6%, or if a guy got injured, or they had, they just had a baby, or they got married, something like that, they might get pushed to a later class. But our graduating class was roughly 170 people of different MOSs and things like that.
Yeah, so that's again, the odds are against you. So that by far already puts you in a very different category. Now, do you find that what within your upbringing, your environment, they always say it's like nurture and nature and nurture, there's certain, do you find that there's certain attributes you actually acquired that lend yourself to be successful in such a treacherous kind of journey towards getting to the end goal? Like, do you find that something that you've done in your past help you to get to that moment?
I think so. When I compare my upbringing, I grew up, like, my dad was a fairly successful mechanic. My mom was in different clerical functions, but I grew up in a middle-class home. I really didn't have struggles. If I look on a global scale, I really didn't have to fight for anything. But I noticed, like, the way my dad treated people. He was very kind. He was empathetic. And my dad was able to collaborate with different people And I noticed for me, I wasn't the strongest, I wasn't the fastest, but for me personally, learning how to talk with people actually was really valuable through all of that training. I could kind of get the direction, like for those missions, or if I was in charge of a different training iteration, I would be able to get buy-in from the guys that I was with. So that really helped me. But there were other guys who grew up on a farm in Nebraska and just had brute strength. And so they would get through by being able to carry a ton, and everybody respected their part of the team, because overall that's what matters. It's not the individual strength. It's the team working together to accomplish whatever the mission set is.
Yeah, and it's incredible that sometimes things you do and you grow up, you don't necessarily know where it's going to lead or where it's going to help you. But eventually it's all coming together to a certain point. Things we've done 10 years before, learned 10 years before now are very much applicable. And let me ask you this, because again, maybe you can answer this, but I've seen some articles recently, and not so recent. I mean, there's this, I think it's an ongoing problem where the Army is having a hard time with recruits today. And just in terms of the quality of the people that get into the forces. Just again, from your perspective, sample size of one, where is the problem? Why are we, not having more people that are qualified to get into the forces?
Sure. And I've seen articles as recent as, I want to say, a couple of weeks ago, either Military Times or something along those lines. I would say there's kind of two main things. The primary is just fitness. I know I've talked to folks that are pilots, and I mean, I never was in the Air Force, so full disclaimer, I could be wrong, but getting folks to actually fit in the cockpit of the aircraft has been like just getting folks that are qualified physically to do it, and not just special forces or anything that would require like a very high level.
Is that why we're moving to? That's why we're moving to drones.
Well, that and
even nobody fits in the cockpit.
Someone in the Air Force is going to be really mad at me, but yeah, I mean, I imagine that's also risk mitigation, right? But the other thing too is during the global war on terror, right or wrong, good or bad, that was a draw for people to want to serve because they felt, hey, there's a cause I could get behind. And not that we're still not doing things around the globe, but after Afghanistan's withdrawal, I'm sure right after Vietnam, I don't know this for sure, but I imagine the recruitment list or the folks wanting to volunteer probably wasn't super high. So I imagine that has something to do with it too. But I think just there's not, with all the distractions that kids have growing up, I don't know how big of a pull serving is. I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're correct, and thanks for asking me that. It's I think it's that. I think it's like you can never pinpoint like the one thing, yeah. Right? You can never say, okay, it's this. I think that a lot of people also don't have the drive. I think that we live in a very comfortable place. And some people are very comfortable of not making the effort, and not just in terms of getting yourself fit, but also in general. Like they don't actively pursue, their destination. They're just comfortable with just, getting a job, getting paid. I mean, we see a lot of transfer payments, a lot of people that get paid on basically just because they're, we've seen that during the pandemic. We got checks. A lot of people got comfortable with getting checks from the government, and they end up like quitting their jobs, and we're making more money, getting checks than working, and then you can find workers because we say, why would I work if I can get paid for free, without doing anything? So I think it's a combination. So coming back to your training, and I really like the fact that you mentioned specifically that you weren't like the strongest, most cunning, like whatever, but you had certain skill set that really fits into the overall, I guess requirements, because they're not doing you a favor of you getting in and getting, completing the course. They need you. and you have to fit into their requirements, but you have certain skill set that was very much in demand. So fast forward to today, you've kind of transitioned. And by the way, I think that everybody has that squiggly line that you described. I've interviewed so many people, and a lot of people are just not, you ask them, hey, how did you get to where you are today? And some people are very, very senior at the top of their game. And they can tell you it's like a lot of times it's luck and circumstance. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily something they did or a choice that they've done, that they've made. And at that time, a choice that they've made may or may not be a good one. So I think you're in the same boat as everyone else. But you decided to kind of transition into cyber. So you were, working. You studied theology and literature, which, by the way, communication is key as well as part of, these quote unquote soft skills, and be able to read and understand. That's like cybersecurity or otherwise. It's great. Why did you decide to kind of transition into the cybersecurity space specifically?
Sure, that's a great question. Looking at, so I mentioned I was a communicator, but more jack of all trades, master of none. So I would have to set up secure networks, but all the way down to like basic line of sight communication with like hand radios, that kind of stuff. So I had a little bit of exposure to it, and I have a good friend, Ben, that has been at Rapid7 and a few other organizations, and he had been like preaching the gospel of cybersecurity for like a decade for me. And I, at the time, was I transitioned to National Guard time, and so I was working at a bank, and it was a good job, good people, but I never really got that sense of continuing the mission, if I could say it that way without sounding too cliche. But looking,
cliches are welcome here.
Okay, cool. I mean, I've listened to some of the folks that have been on your podcast, and just try not to repeat or regurgitate just what I've heard, but the overarching concept of how there is still a huge fight to be had in the world, whether it's nation state or different criminal gangs that are wreaking havoc on our country and on other countries. So having that buy-in from that side of like my background, I love the aspect of that. And I really didn't know any of the position titles. I knew Ben was a sales engineer, but I was like, what's a sales engineer? What is that? So I was able to take my background of sales and weave it. So I'm at a company, Halcyon, now, and I just messaged my boss, Jason, on LinkedIn, like, hey, I would love to talk to you if you have 30 minutes. If I could just connect with you and learn what this looks like. And that was more or less the transition into it. But the other thing too, and by all means cut me off if I'm getting too long-winded, is the nurturing and mentorship attitude that's in cybersecurity has been incredible. So many folks just based on LinkedIn connections, like even yourself, just being willing to share knowledge. I don't know if I've been in another industry that has been that willing to share. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love it. And I love, again, my experience has been just like yours. And it's just so cool to be able to connect with people with different backgrounds. And it's also very cool that you can be successful being a musician or being, somebody like yourself with a, very different background. In fact, the diversity aspect of it from a background perspective is very, it's unique, but it's also something that, creates the strength in cybersecurity community, right? We need people from various types of backgrounds to contribute. Again, somebody like yourself, you have to get out of your comfort zone. Again, it's not easy to reach out to somebody you don't know. And then also, like, to double click on what you just said, I think a lot of people don't realize how many roles are within cybersecurity. There are thousands of roles. So people like when they do a boot camp or whatever, and actually you're the second quote unquote salesperson that decided to convert and do some cybersecurity stuff. So initially you mentioned that you kind of dove in how do you get yourself smart in the space? Because you were doing some other stuff, even though you had a background, an intense background in networking and, line of sight and all that communication and so on. How do you get yourself smart into be able to have a conversation at eye level with some practitioners around, very specific topics within cybersecurity?
Sure. I think first off, realizing who I'm talking to. That's been almost the biggest thing, is realizing that I might be conversing with a senior network engineer or an architect or a very competent CISO or director of IT, whatever. So realizing that I don't have to have all the knowledge to be able to converse to start with, but just understanding the business impact that they're focused on, understanding what challenges they're facing. Taking that mentality, I think, is very helpful. And then the second component has been just making myself available to connect with any of the folks at my organization that have been doing this for a long time. So talking with them about how did they get to the product that they have now, what challenges led them to that, and trying to show that I know I don't know everything. Please show me what you know. Because otherwise, I think it's pretty easy for salesmen to try to come in and think they have to know everything, and then just, frankly, just piss people off. Because, no one really wants to hear, not nobody, but the salesman approach, obviously I have a role to fulfill, but ultimately, and I know you've talked about on your podcast, is customers first, like understanding what they're going through. I don't know if that answers the question, but
yeah, for sure. And again, this is completely unscripted, and you're doing great. And I have to tell you, like, just watching you speak, you strike me as somebody who's very humble, right? It's just that you've done so much. You could have taken a different route, but you decided to jump into the cybersecurity space with both feet, and you're reaching out because you want to be better at what you do. And again, I can't tell you how many people, even doing this, is coming out of your shell, right? So it's not easy to go out there and be able to talk, and be recorded and all that stuff. It's being outside of the box. You could have picked a different route, right? I mean, somebody like yourself with your background could have done physical security, be responsible for. I mean, there's people in different roles, but there's something about cybersecurity specifically that you mentioned that you really like, and that you talk about the mission. So as you join the cybersecurity forces, pun intended.
I like it.
Do you find that there is everybody has that mission in mind, or are people so busy in the day-to-day operations that they don't see the bigger picture?
Are you referring to folks that are in the cybersecurity industry, or just okay?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So overall, I think partly why I joined my organization was that I see everybody is united, specifically with ransomware and the scourge that it is in our country and globally. So that part has been kind of invigorating. I'm 5 months into the industry as a whole, so you could, I'm sure, educate me way more on that part. But from my perspective, being new, there's one united front, and that's what attracted me here. I think people prospecting, because I've talked to other friends that are looking at the cybersecurity industry, and they're looking at, okay, the average income is higher than average. I can work remote, but I don't know if that's going to lend to longevity. If just like folks wanting to go into nursing during the pandemic because they could pick up a pretty decent paycheck if they were traveling or something like that. But then the on the ground job is going to be really difficult. So what do you think? Do you think that is a overarching thing that people see, or?
Yeah, I think people are busy. They're busy in the day-to-day operations and they don't see necessarily the bigger picture.
Okay.
I think you're right. Just looking at the overall paycheck is not sustainable.
Yeah.
I think that you have to look at you have to enjoy it. You have to look forward to it. And I think in order for you to be good at what you do, specifically in this particular profession, you have to continuously improve and learn. And because it's such a moving, fast moving target. So today we have ransomware, tomorrow it's going to be something else. And it's a fast moving target. And then no one is going to sit down with you and say, hey, Lance, can you show me, or can I show you and teach you all that, all the information? You have to go out and either search for it, and always ask people, how do they get smart about it? And there's no excuse now. There's so many available resources available for you, including podcasts such as this one, but YouTube and otherwise. There's no excuse to not do it, but you have to make the investment. You got to put in the time.
Yep.
And somebody just they interviewed this week said you got to embrace the suck.
Yeah.
And and I think that's because he went through like a boot camp around programming, and he became a product manager for a cybersecurity company. He moved from sales to that. Mm-hmm. But he said it sucked for a long time. Until you got through the curve,
I mean, I can relate. Like one of the courses I was able to go to was the military free fall parachute course outside of Yuma. And sure, people like that looks great in recruitment ads, like jumping out at 15,000 feet and looking sweet, all that kind of stuff, and doing cool things. But people don't see the hours that you had to spend laying in a swamp, just getting bit by every bug, and there's a trade-off. So I imagine it seems that way here. Like, yes, there's a steep learning curve, so you have to get in there and do it. But people see success in what you post on LinkedIn, and they just see that as, oh, that's what I could achieve, without seeing all the progress that you have to make first.
Yeah, and the sacrifice.
Yeah.
And I think we live in a society where, if you look at LinkedIn, and there's explosion of titles. There's, Instagram is the same. I mean, you look at it, everybody's doing phenomenally great. It's like, and you look back at yourself, and it's like, oh my God, am I doing something wrong? Because everybody's an expert. Everybody is like, has all these titles, but it's not the case. People are just, I think everybody struggle in their personal life as well as a professional life.
Sure.
And, being able to admit that. And you mentioned that, I love the story of how you had to, for you to jump off a free fall jump and learn how to do that, you had to spend many hours on the ground into very unconventional conditions.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
So today, when you are talking to customers and potential customers, what do you find, specifically that, that you kind of relate to them? Like, again, I think your background is somebody who did sales. You find there's a difference between, selling vehicles and selling technology?
Well, I mean, the thing that I experienced with selling cars was, it was pretty boutique items. I mean, for the most part, the folks that were purchasing cars from me could afford to do it. And so, that's another discussion, I guess. But I think that the real benefit to being in this space is, as soon as that person left the dealership with a car, it's depreciating. It's going to cost them a ton in repairs, etc. Where the converse side of what we're doing in cybersecurity in any facet is trying overall as an industry to protect the business operations, to protect the investment in the systems to begin with. So I think there's a huge difference in the return on investment there. So that makes me feel way better internally. I don't feel like, oh man, that guy's going to lose 30 grand today. So it's that kind of thing. But ultimately, the idea for a good salesman, I'm not talking about some snake oil guy that's just trying to grease everything and make everything sound slick. For someone who actually cares about the client, they should take the same approach, finding out what is actually important, what is on the the project roadmap at a given organization. Like, what does that organization care about? Because if they don't care about what I have as a platform to offer, then there's no point. I don't want to, there's no use in strong arming somebody. That just doesn't work.
Yeah. And you mentioned specifically that you felt like, for example, if they didn't buy the warranty and you knew they're going to incur some very high costs, you didn't feel good about it, and nobody would. So how do you make sure, like, maybe walk me through like some discovery questions that when you meet with clients the first time, how do you uncover their requirements? And then maybe we jump into some discussion about specifically what the company does.
Sure.
And then why not, just to cover that, and then just walk me through the process of discovery and then what the product does. And I'll put you in the spot, like, what's the underlying reason for them to sign the dotted line and leave the parking lot.
Sure. So really the main things that I first of all want to understand is, what does their current environment look like? What are they using for an EDR, an EPP? What are they using for their backup and recovery software? I want to make sure that I get as much information as possible so I can tell my engineering team what's going on so that everything is as smooth as possible. I also want to know, like, for our product in particular, like, do they care about ransomware? Which obviously most of the time the answer is yes. But really just doing as much fact finding as I can about what their goals are, what their problems have been in the past. And that's not so that I could use it later as like ammunition against them, but just so I make sure that our core competencies align with what they want to accomplish.
And it's a fine art, Lance, because sometimes they say, well, I sign up with you and I just want to see it work. So I want to see a demo. Why are you asking me all those questions? Get to the point. How do you overcome that? Because that's a difficult proposition to spend time with someone asking questions.
Yeah. And generally speaking, if they're interested to see the demo first, let's say I'm on a call and I have my sales engineers ready with a demo to show the technical side of things. I am totally aware that I'm the caveman waving the fire torch in the front. Like, yes, that's my job, right? But I think taking some like pride out of it, and if they want to jump right to talk to the folks that make it and understand how each and every component works, that's totally fine with me. I'd rather them do that than not see the demo.
In one in particular, in terms of answers, would you say that, as soon as you hear these answers, you go, oh yeah, this is a great fit. This is exactly what, and then we'll walk through like exactly how the product does it.
Sure. So like right now, the main things that I need to hear from a client is that they actually value stopping ransomware. They value the way that our product works. Really, it's pretty simple. The nice thing is, like, we'll play well with the folks that built the product from the beginning. Knew that if we couldn't integrate it with everything, it's like how are you going to sell that? That's just pointless. I know I've heard you talk about that before with your organization, like, making it simple for MSSPs to use it, making it agnostic as far as, okay, are they using CrowdStrike or are they using SentinelOne? Just working well with whatever they have.
By the way, Lance, I use the word neutral, as somebody who's like, because agnostic means you kind of don't know what the other, but here it's neutral. I like the word neutral because it's like you do know what the others are doing, but you're just neutral about it.
That's a perfect, I'm going to start using that instead of agnostic. I might have misled customers by saying agnostic,
So let's walk through kind of the information lane and figure out what it is that how does your product work in a high level. If I already have an EDR or have some things in place, where does the product fit? And again, it's really odd. You mentioned that some people don't care or they don't feel that it's going to happen to them. Maybe kind of like walk me through objection handling.
Sure. So like super high level, our company was originally, we have a parent company, Boldened, that built offensive cyber tools for the DoD. And they took that and aimed it towards ransomware. So their main goal was to stop it, period. So,
and the name of the company, just to spell it out for people so they can reach
sure,
out.
Halcyon, Halcyon. And the other like big factor in creating the organization is the founders have known that marketing has been atrocious in cybersecurity. And so we know that all products are going to fail. We built a preventive side to stop the ransomware from detonating in the first place. But in the event that it doesn't, we would view that as a failure. But we're able to capture the symmetric encryption keys in real time, and provide the decryptor so that the business is up and running in hours versus having to use backups. And then how do you know that the backups don't have the pre-detonated ransomware? But ultimately not having to pay the ransom again by using the key capture feature. And that's obviously super high level.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
No, it's just so cool. I love it. So because it always amazes me, just like, you mentioned in your military background, there's so many ways you can be right in so many ways.
Yep.
You can problem solve in so many ways. And even here, we have a problem. And then this is the first time I've heard of somebody like capturing the key exchange, and then making a copy of that to prevent. There's a lot of other solutions that do all kinds of stuff. And that's incredible. So, how do you actually do that? Do you like sit on a network and sniff the traffic? What's the process look like?
So it has to do with where we sit in the memory. And beyond that, I would definitely be the wrong dude to describe how that works. Maybe someday I'll
in a high level.
But yeah,
and
essentially where we sit in the memory is
and Lance, like, this is sometimes people just want to have like they don't want to go into the nuts and bolts. There's a place for that, but a lot of things,
oh sure.
Think about somebody listening to this when they're like shopping at Target. They're like looking at the TV aisle and they're just listening to this. So they all want to know is like, give me the net.
Yeah.
So you sit in memory. And you capture some of the communication.
That's right. It has to do with like where we sit with our kernel drivers and how we've sat in there. And the other really cool thing is a lot of the ransomware that our team has seen will try to and I say CrowdStrike just because they're one of the biggest CDRs. Like I said, neutral, right? But the ability to stop those from being unhooked, because some of the ransomware attacks will try to go in there and then disable, Defender, or they'll try to unhook CrowdStrike. So being able to augment those platforms versus replacing it, like we highly encourage, like you were saying, objections. Folks will say, well, I have whatever service, right? And we'll say, well, that's great. We encourage you. You should have those things. They're really important. But being able to sit lower and protect specifically a ransomware, because it behaves differently. It mostly is behaving like you and me on the computer, encrypting, exporting files, deleting files, but being able to stop the automated process of that in a short period of time. Since ransomware, I know that some of the different strains that our team has shown us, it's within minutes, it's encrypting hundreds of files versus malware, which might take a bit. But
yeah, and it's so interesting, as you mentioned, it's this cat and mouse thing where, the first thing it does, which makes total sense, is to turn off the alerting, turn off the logging, the alerting, everything else from existing technologies out there. So you work well with others, right? You work well with existing technologies out there. So what's the deployment process look like? Let's say somebody says, oh, this is interesting. So deployment, and then, unfortunately, how do you know it's working? Because the only time it's going to work, it's working is when you actually get hit, but you may not get hit for a little while.
Sure.
So how do you prove that what you're doing is correct and true?
Sure. So for deployment, it's pretty simple. We just deploy the agent and you register it using the code. There's no restall. We're super lightweight, I think.
And the agent sits where?
So it sits on the endpoint.
Okay.
But we've made the endpoint lighter than some of the other things that we have on the cloud, just because we know some of the folks that we talk to, they're running super low RAM, and the last thing any vendor wants is their customers to be blue screened because you gave them such a heavy product that it's just not going to work.
Yeah, that's what they call it, blue screen of death. Nobody wants to see that.
But then as far as tracking it, I know we have like an event system, but I'd actually want to talk to my team about like what they're seeing in the wild and what they've actually stopped and how that looks. I know I love talking with our chief technical officer, Ryan Smith, and some of the other folks at our company that are like toying with live ransomware and watching them do this, and just like I would feel so uncomfortable manipulating product like that because I just don't know what I'm doing with it. But
and do you offer like guarantee or any warranty, or if you used to have that and still get hit? Do you have anything like what's the kind of like the I buy it, install it, and now it's protecting me? Do you have any guarantees that you offer?
I haven't heard that. That's a really good question. I don't think I have like a guarantee, but I'm like, that's, having these discussions leads to like development. Maybe we'll come up with a guarantee then if that makes people feel good about it too.
I always try in an unscripted conversation and it's perfect. And
I love it.
It's perfectly it's perfectly fine that's what people like to hear, that you don't necessarily have all the answers. And then even having a no, it's perfectly valid. I would say something to the effect where, if I was the owner of the product, I would say something to the effect, hey, we are comfortable knowing that we can help you at that, but we unfortunately, as a small organization, we have obviously liability insurance and so on, but the costs associated with potential ransomware are prohibitive. So we cannot potentially offer you a $50 million or $100 million coverage because we're going to be out of business. If we have to do that for every customer. That's my answer would be just off the cuff, so you deploy it, and then, do you have any reporting mechanism? Like, how does that, how do I know it's up and running and it's doing its thing?
Sure.
Or it just sits in the background? So,
we can pull feeds from this into whatever the SIM or whatever the client has for their reporting. We'll use that as the avenue. We do have a GUI and an interface to utilize to see what's going on, but that's been what I've seen most of our customers using is some other SIM, or if they're using an MSSP, kind of integrating with that platform.
And speaking of customers, who do you find is the kind of the perfect fit for this, or is there one?
I mean, it's really broad, right? I mean, there's recently. I know, I think it was the Maui variant from Korea that was targeting hospitals. And so looking at the overall medical enterprises and seeing what ransomware has done there, the different mid to larger colleges that have actually had to close their doors this past year. But, 37% of companies globally last year were hit with this. And it's not to spread fear or something like that, but it's actually what is happening is, these ransomware gangs, some of the companies that manufacture this stuff, the return on investment for them is so high that they can't not send it to organizations because the profit margins are ridiculous. But there's, anything with logistics, anything where the computer systems are the linchpin for their operations, I think is really who we try to have conversations with.
In doing a POC or proof of value or proof of concept, do you install a couple agents and then you infect a USB key and with ransomware and drop it in the parking lot to see if somebody's going to plug it in and see if it works, or what's the process?
I'm definitely mentioning that to our team as an idea.
You make sure that it says the USB key says payroll, because that's what will entice them to actually plug it in.
Yeah, somebody will do it. Yeah. The with proof of concept or proof of values, we want to deploy as many agents in that concept to show that it's working. And then also just to, like I was mentioning earlier with integration, we want to be able to see what their environment looks like. So we'll deploy first in a learning mode so that we make sure, okay, is this how these systems are operating? How is everything talking together? And then we'll go into blocking mode. But 100%, we're all about people seeing, instead of just hearing, the sales dude talk, does it actually work? Right. And seeing that concept.
And if you don't have a EDR, can you still use it? Mm-hmm. If you don't have endpoint detection and response, can you still use this tool? Absolutely.
I know Jason Williams, who's he's a field engineer. The guy's an amazing person to talk to. He just runs Halcyon on his laptop. That's all he runs. I think he has Defender as well. But I know for sure on unless he's changed something. I know that's all he uses.
So do people install it? Do they and they go, they have this, sense of security to just start surfing everywhere, start opening up email attachment they shouldn't be doing? I mean,
I'm sure the product,
because they feel a sense of security, or they feel like they can have wearing this invisible suit now.
I definitely don't encourage that. I definitely don't encourage still, the user. I know regardless of product, if you don't, exercise caution too, that's still the human element. I know they ingrained this in our training, a while back, but humans are more important than hardware. That's still the most important thing is doing basics right. But yeah, I'm sure somebody on our legal team would be really, really pissed at me if I encourage that,
Yeah, absolutely. Lance, you've done a phenomenal job. I have to tell you, for somebody who's been in this industry for, relatively speaking, short amount of time,
yeah.
You've done a phenomenal job explaining what this tool does and the benefits and everything else. I'm telling you, this, you've done really, really well. I applaud you for being able to translate the concept in a really easy to understand manner.
Sure.
What's the easiest way for people to reach out to you for anything, from cybersecurity to otherwise? What's the easiest way?
Sure. So, phone or email, by all means, it's LMED halcyon.ai. Or just hit me up on LinkedIn, Lance Medina. If folks have questions in general too about transitioning into this industry, if folks are listening and they have questions about training to become a Green Beret or something like that, or just to shoot the breeze, I'm all about it. By all means, feel free to hit me up.
It's so cool. Listen, I'm too old for that, and I've done my share of training, but I can tell you it's such a cool story, and I can't wait. We should probably do this, every couple of months. I can't wait to see where you go next.
Sure.
So I'll follow your kind of your career path, and I'm love to have you host you in different occasions as well. And then where are you physically located? Sure.
I'm in this small town, Woodland Park, Colorado. So I'm 20 minutes west of Colorado Springs, so central Colorado.
Yeah. So
yourself?
Maybe I'm just outside New York City.
That's right.
So
okay.
and I do host events in New York City. So I was about to ask you, every once in a while, if you travel this way, I'll definitely host you in person in one of the upcoming events.
I would love to meet up, and also just I know I've listened to your descriptions of what you're doing now, but even just hearing more of your military background, I would love to pick your brain and hear it.
It's at this point I tell you, I can tell you, but then I have to kill you. How it works.
I love it. Cool.
Just joking. For all of those who watched, thank you very much. And again, I much appreciated your time. It's much appreciated. And stay safe online as well as offline. Thanks, Lance, for joining.
Yeah.
Thanks all for joining today.
Thank you.
Thank you.